Raise your hand if you've ever wondered how new moms are able to do those night feeds without becoming a complete zombie. Go ahead, raise your hand. I see you. And you are not alone. But what if I told you that there are some simple, easy tricks that could actually turn those night feeds into being something that's not just bearable, but actually manageable? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to be discussing in today's live. Actually, I'm going to be spilling all the tea on how to make those night feeds manageable for you and for your baby. So go ahead, grab a drink, get comfy, and let's get started. If this is your first time joining me live, my name is Stephanie Poole. I am a certified doula and lactation consultant. I help first time moms transition into motherhood by helping them have a more empowered and confident birth because I help you prepare, right? I get you ready before it's go time. So if you're interested, if you are pregnant, if you will be giving birth soon, if this is your very first pregnancy and you want to get started preparing for your birth, but you're not really sure how to get started, well, first of all, you are definitely in the right place. Go ahead and subscribe and become part of the Birth Prep Academy family. Y'all, over here, I believe in having an empowered and confident birth. So everything that I do is pushing you towards that result. And so if you could definitely use that help, then be sure to subscribe. Stay close. I promise to tell you everything that I know to help you birth like a boss, pretty much. Okay. With that being said, and I have my trusty notes here, we need to discuss why our nighttime feeds so important. Why even have this discussion about night feeds? Now, first of all, let me just say, newborn babies eat anywhere from 8 to 10 times a day. That is normal for all newborn babies. With that being said, what we run into as a lactation consultant is moms who they start out pretty good, but they notice a decrease in their milk supply. And so, one of the questions I always ask moms to explain to me, tell me a little bit about, your feeding habits with your baby. And a lot of times what I'll notice is that moms are beginning to skip that night feed, right? Well, of course they are. You've been up, you've been taking care of the baby around the clock. You're exhausted as a new mom, and I totally get it. But the reason why it's so important to stick with those night feeds, especially in the first 4 to 6 weeks after you have the baby, is because that is when you start to establish your milk supply, right? And so having those consistent feeds is going to help you get a good milk supply that is adequate for your baby's nutrition and growth. Now, let me go back to the original question I asked. So, why are night feeds so important? Why not just feed during the day and then skip the night feeds? The night feeds are important because there is a hormone called prolactin, and it is your milk producing hormone. It's highest at night. It is the highest at night. Now, whenever I'm doing a consultation, I always try to explain it like this. Every time you feed, your levels are up here. And then in between, they start to drop like this, right? But every time you have a feeding, it goes back up. And then within the next couple hours, it'll start to come down. And it does this all day. At night, if you are skipping that night feed, what happens is now it's going down and you're not giving a feeding to bring it up like it's been doing. So it continues to decrease. It just continues to go down. And what happens is that therefore it affects your milk supply because now you're working harder and harder and harder to get those prolactin levels up. So that is the primary reason why we don't want to skip those night feeds or pumping sessions. Now, it's my personal recommendation that instead of pumping, that you actually just feed the baby. That way you don't even, we're going to get into how to make the night feeds so manageable that you are doing the bare minimum. You're not breaking your sleep, right? If you have to pump, you got to do what you got to do because there might be a medical reason why you or your baby needs to pump for a little bit. And maybe just administer the bottle. One of those reasons is if you have a baby that, is struggling to gain weight. Breastfeeding actually burns calories. So there may be a time when it's suggested instead of burning those extra calories for the baby to work at feeding, just administer your breast milk through a bottle, which would require you to pump. But for all other purposes, right? Healthy baby, healthy mom, there's no extenuating circumstances. During the night, as a lactation consultant, it's my preference and my recommendation for you to just latch the baby. It's much, much simpler that way. Okay. So now that we've talked about why nighttime feeds are important because of that milk producing hormone that is at its peak at night, right? Now we need to talk about, well, what are some of the common struggles of, moms that are breastfeeding during the night? Well, we know, first of all, you're exhausted. So the last thing you want to do is get up to feed the baby, but the baby has to eat, right? The other thing is that you might feel like, well, I'm constantly waking up. The baby is constantly wanting to feed. So we're going to talk about this. Also, it seems like getting up, getting prepared to feed and do an actual pump session, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, right? Hello. Welcome. When you come in, please put where you are joining me from. And if you're pregnant or if you are in your recent postpartum, if you're breastfeeding, just let me know. And if you have any questions, I will answer them at the end. So these are all reasons that moms struggle with those night feedings, right? Well, let's go ahead and hop into how we can address this to make it not just bearable, but manageable. The very first thing I want you to do, strategy number 1, is to create a nighttime feeding station. Create a nighttime feeding station. So before you go to bed, you're going to create a spot, preferably by your bed. And I'll talk about why, because that's part of strategy number 2. That's going to work with this I'm telling you now. So probably like by your nightstand, have a little box or a little area where you can be in bed and reach for whatever you might need. Have this area stocked. I have a little list here. I want to make sure I cover everything, but stock that area with burp cloths, water, snacks for you, diapers, wipes, all of those kinds of things, right? And try to have a dim light somewhere. A very small dim light. Why? Because when you wake up to do these feeds, 2 things. I don't want you to break your sleep so much where you're waking up completely and now you have to try and coach yourself back to sleep, right? That's what happens when we have the distraction of like a TV or a bright light. Also, it stimulates the baby and it makes the baby confused because now they are trying to wake up because of the light. So you need to keep the room very dim and just have access to a dim light that you can, utilize should you need to grab anything. But you are going to stock your area before you go to bed. And the area is going to be close to your bed where you can literally just reach over and grab one of the items if you happen to need them during the night. So that's number 1. That's number one. Don't make it so you have to get up and go downstairs to grab any of your vital things that you might need during the night for the baby. They're going to be right next to you. That's part number one. Next, I want you to master the side lying position. The side lying position is literally feeding the baby while you're laying on your side. So a lot of times, especially for my newborn babies, this is specifically for my newborn babies, they are in a bassinet right next to the bed. And some of the bassinets are almost like a co-sleeper because it has a compartment that you can pull out and just slide the baby into the bed with you, do the feeding, and then slide the baby back into their carrier. And so if you are pregnant and you are thinking about breastfeeding, I want you to consider that when you're looking for a bassinet, right? You want something that's going to be conducive, that can go very close to you by the bed, so that when it comes time to do those night feedings, you don't have to get up, go into the baby's nursery, do a lot of shuffling. You want it right there next to you so you can pull baby close, do the side lying position, and then put the baby safely back into their compartment. Okay. Now, if you want specifics on side lying, I have other resources, or we could do a one-on-one. You can Google it. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do to help you understand the side lying position. But it is my recommendation that breastfeeding mothers take advantage of the side lying position for night feeds. That is an absolute game changer. And I know it sounds simple, but oddly enough, a lot of people don't think about that for nighttime feedings. They think they need to get up, sit upright with the baby, hold the baby in a chair to do a feeding. And you don't need to do that. That is actually one of the concierge benefits of breastfeeding your baby. The fact that you don't have to get up, you don't have to go downstairs, you don't have to turn on the light in the kitchen and warm up a bottle, or, prepare everything and get it ready. No, you just slide the baby close to you, you get on your side to do the side lying position, and then you return the baby back to the bassinet. Very simple, very simple. And then don't forget, I talked about having that night feeding station right next to the bed. So if the baby has milk, some kind of spit up or something like that, you can always grab a towel. Or if you need to do a change, because oftentimes you need to change them around the same time as the feeding, you have diapers and wipes and everything right there. So you don't have to necessarily get up to break the sleep, that you making it easier for you to get back to sleep, but then also not stimulating the baby to the point where they fully wake up. Okay? So that's number two. That's what I want you to keep in mind. The last thing I want you to consider is learning your baby's cues. Now, this may take, a few days, especially if you're a new mom, to understand those baby cues. And the reason why is because at night, when you hear your baby and they start tossing and turning, a lot of times our automatic reaction is, let me get up with the baby to feed the baby. But very often they're not. They're just being human and kind of shifting their position in sleep. So look for specific cues. Are they sucking their hands? Do you hear them sucking? And things like that. Because a lot of times they will give you the cues to actually say, I'm hungry, it's time to feed. Okay? So when we talk about that, it's also important to talk about the myths. Like, sometimes I hear people say, well, at night I do formula because the baby sleeps longer. And that's simply not true. It does not. Your baby's sleeping patterns and how long they stay asleep is not just based on their feeding. It's based on a couple different things. And so the thought is that formula takes longer to digest, so it sits on their tummy longer and they tend to, sleep longer. That may or may not be true. That's not true for every baby. So to do that, is not the ultimate answer to getting a baby to sleep longer. Now, let me also say this as a lactation consultant. You need to be careful, especially with your young babies. You need them to go through that feed, and sleep cycle. If you have questions about that, I did a live on that yesterday. You can go to my channel and check out the live that I did explaining what the the wake, feed, sleep cycle is all about. And that's important. You need your baby to get into that foundation and that rhythm of sleeping, which will also help with these night feeds that we're talking about, because they'll be used to that. When you have a newborn baby, they're not going to be up long anyway. Newborn babies tend to get overstimulated if they're up longer than about an hour. 45 minutes to an hour, and most newborns start to get a little overstimulated. They need a lot of sleep in those first days and weeks after birth. It's essential for their growth. So the night feeds, once you get them to become manageable, once you're able to get a rhythm down because you have your station set up, because you have, the position, everything you need for them to do that sideline position really easy at night, trust me, and I'm saying this because like it's legit, it's true, that once you get into a rhythm with those night feeds as a breastfeeding mom, if you're able to do some of these things and really implement them, you will find that it gets to be second nature. You don't even think about it. It's so easy for you and your baby to do a feeding and then immediately go back off to sleep. For most people, it becomes easy peasy. It's just getting used to the baby and their feeding cues, their rhythm, their timing. How do they normally sleep during the day? Are they, have we been pretty consistent with getting them on that routine that I talked about in yesterday's live? How is that? How is that? Getting into all of these things will, in fact, help your night feeds to become easy like Sunday morning. They really are. And before long, you'll become one of those moms, breastfeeding moms, who actually talks about, oh yeah, it's so simple to do these feeds now. It makes it hard to do anything else because it's so easy. Everything else seems a little harder when you have to prepare the formula, when you have to warm up the water and all of that kind of stuff and mix it, and then you have to get up to actually feed the baby versus just doing that sideline position that I talked about, which is really the hero in this situation. It is really something you want to look at if in fact you plan to breastfeed. Now, last but not least, I'll just say this as a quick recap. We talked about night feeds, why they're important for your milk supply, right? Because of that hormone we talked about. That's important. You got to lean on that because sometimes you're sleepy and you're like, I'm not doing it. But when you think about this is something I need to do to be able to get that milk in, then it allows you to be a little bit more committed, right, to that process. So why the night feeds are crucial. We talked about that. We talked about setting up the feeding station, the sideline position, how to work that in your night routine, and also recognizing the hunger cues of your baby. All of that together is the winning formula. That is going to make night feeds, like I promised in the beginning, not just bearable, but manageable. Okay? Doing all of these together will absolutely help your night feeds to be manageable. Ignore the the myths out there about, all of this other stuff that you can do to get your baby to sleep longer. Be very cautious when you have your baby sleep, especially a newborn, sleeping very deeply for too long. We don't like to see that. Babies have a natural rhythm, and we like to support their natural rhythm. We don't want to do anything that could force them into a deeper sleep that they would not normally take on their own. We don't want to do anything to have them sleep longer than what they would normally do as part of their natural circadian rhythm. Okay? Especially as newborns. That can actually go off into a whole different thing that you just don't want. Okay? So that's why it's important. We don't want to manipulate this any. We want to really support what is naturally there for us to support as a breastfeeding mother. Now, finally, I'll say this. It is always my pleasure to jump on and to serve you guys and really talk about these issues, because if you're pregnant, knowing this ahead of time is going to make you different than other moms who had no clue into giving birth, and then they start jumping in trying to breastfeed and they hit all of these stumbling blocks. And what it does is it positions you to quit much too soon. But knowing these things ahead of time, understanding and having a game plan before you even have the baby is what is the reason why so many of my moms and clients are successful. It's just because they know, and we have a game plan. And so because of that, you can jump in and you are more likely to be successful and have a positive transition into motherhood, because you're doing this. You're learning, you're understanding, you're getting a game plan together, and that's going to be a game changer. It is going to be a game changer, especially if you are a first-time mom and if this is your first pregnancy. So kudos to you, because you're already doing awesome things, and I am excited for you. All right, with that being said, thank you again for joining me. And until next time, happy birthing, y'all. Bye.